Gather round and welcome back to another edition of Todd Talks College Football. And today we're going to break down a full recap of the 4 playoff games that we saw over the last couple days. That's right, we saw some real crazy upsets in this tournament that we weren't expecting. I can guarantee you that. And we're going to get into a little breakdown of all of these. I've already put the shorts out, the instant reaction right after the games, but we're going to do a little bit bigger deep dive into these games and how they played out. So let's break it down. Let's start with the Miami Hurricanes and the Ohio State Buckeyes on New Year's Eve, and the Miami Hurricanes shock the world and pull off the upset 24-14 over Ohio State. And this game really came down to who was more physical, and I really think Miami won the physicality battle in this football game. It really started on the first drive. We had a third down here for Ohio State. We had a situation where they moved Reuben Bain and Akeem over to Ohio State's right side of their offensive line and absolutely blew that up over there. Pass rush sacked Julian Sayin there on the third play of Ohio State's first drive, and it really set the tempo and kind of the tenacity that Miami's defense was going to play with here in this football game. We saw, again, both teams kind of struggled there on the first series. Miami punted on their first series. Ohio State got this sacked on that third down, and they had to punt. Miami came back in their third, or I guess it would have been their second drive, had a really good drive, moving the ball into at least field goal range, if not a touchdown scoring position. Fumble there. Ohio State got the ball back, but couldn't really do anything with it. They had to punt again. And then Miami came down with a really nice drive and moved the football into position to score, taking a 7-0 lead. And then, Ohio State needing to tie that score up comes out on the next drive. And, they throw this kind of screen over to the left side of the field. When you rewatch the play, the way this play was set up, Jeremiah Smith should have made a block here immediately on the defensive back that was in front of him. He did not make that block. He kind of moved upfield, which is shocking considering that the play was a screen to Cardinal Tate. And anyways, that is intercepted by Scott. He then runs that back for a pick six, putting Miami up 14-0. Both teams traded blows for a little while after that, exchanging punts. Ohio State does get the ball back late in the second quarter. They do move the ball, probably their only drive of the game to date. In the game, they move the ball down. They get into field goal position. I think it was right around 45, 46 yards. And Fielding just absolutely misses this thing off to the left. Going into halftime there with Miami up 14-0. Ohio State comes out in the second half, and on the first drive, a very nice drive, 8-minute drive to come down and score, to cut the lead from to 14-7 at that point. Miami, though, comes right back down and kicks another field goal, putting it up into a 2-score lead at 17-7. Ohio State gets the ball back again, and again, another nice long drive that culminates in a touchdown there to make this game 17-14. The problem was it was really taking almost too long for Ohio State to score. The clock was dwindling away. Now we're down into the fourth quarter here. Ohio State, stops Miami on a critical down. Third down, forces them to punt. They get the ball back, get the ball to just about midfield there. It's a 2nd down and 10, and they get called for a holding call on this down. Ends up knocking them back 10 yards, putting them into a 2nd and 20 situation. Not exactly a good situation there on 2nd down. They can't convert. They have to end up punting the ball. They were sitting at 4th and 22, and they had an illegal formation on the punt, which put them at 4th and 27. Really nothing you could do to go for it here, although they really needed to go for it. If they were anywhere, 4th and 10 or better, they probably would have went for it. But they ended up having to punt at the situation. Miami then takes that ball down and, ultimately puts the capper on here at 24-14. Ohio State kind of let them into the end zone. But at that point, they were down 2 scores then with like 55 seconds to go. Julian Sand comes out in the next drive and throws another interception to pretty much ice the game at that point. So really what this boiled down to, I said it at the beginning, it's really the physicality of Miami that Ohio State couldn't match. I don't think talent-wise there was a separation there. I really just think Miami was by far the more physical football team. These are things that have been said about Ryan Day's program for years, about the physicality not being there, the toughness, the grittiness. When they get into some of these games, we saw it a few years ago when they beat Notre Dame on the road, and Lou Holtz questioned his manhood there and Ryan Day came out, we're a physical football team. Well, at the end of the day, we're really not. Ohio State, it can be physical sometimes, but when they get up against equal competition, they're a little bit more finesse than they are physical, and that kind of showed up in this game. Again, Ohio State made the mistakes at critical times. We had Julian Sand got sacked 5 times by this Miami defense. So overall, Miami ultimately deserved to win this game. No question about it. Now, could we say that the layoff has hurt Ohio State here, coming out a little sluggish in the first half? And yes, you could say that, or you could say that it was Miami's defense that was making Ohio State sluggish. So ultimately, Miami gets the win. It's a great win for the program, for Miami. They move on into the semifinal rounds, and we'll see how that works out for them. But I really feel like this is a team that's now peaking perfect timing, kind of like Ohio State was last year. And Miami has a real shot here with the way they're playing defense to get through the semifinal round and even make it into the national championship game. So we're going to see how all that breaks down. So ultimately, Miami wins this game 24-14, ending the Buckeye season in a run for a back-to-back national title. Let's move over to the Orange Bowl now, where we saw Oregon absolutely dominate Texas Tech 23-0 is how this game ended up. Texas Tech came out and they just couldn't move the ball at all against this Oregon defense at first. Texas Tech's defense played okay. They got a couple stops here and there, but overall, I told you I wasn't sold on this Texas Tech defense going into the game. And again, I think Oregon left a lot of points out here on the field in this football game. They did win 23-0, but overall, they probably could have won this game 35-0. They did miss a field goal attempt in this game. Dante Moore had a couple terrible plays. One, well, it wasn't his fault necessarily, but there was a terrible snap that he ended up having to take a big loss in a down that ended up killing that drive for them. They also had a fumble on a handoff kind of thing that cost them another potential drive killing play there. Dante Moore also missed some passes down the field. I don't want to say he was not reading the field very well. It didn't feel like he wasn't getting the ball out of his hand fast enough. There was a couple times where he had guys running down the middle of the field that he just couldn't hit, and it wasn't necessarily because of the Texas Tech pressure. It was more of just holding the ball too long there for Dante Moore. Again, Texas Tech's offense couldn't get anything done, but the defense did play overall okay, I guess, considering what they were up against, not being able to have an offense that could move the ball at all, going 3 and out, and having the force the Texas Tech's Red Raider defense back out on the field. But again, I never thought this game was going to be a close game going into it. I always felt like Oregon had definitely the advantage on the lines of scrimmage, even though everyone was giving Texas Tech's defensive line, most especially, a lot of credit on that. I just didn't feel like they were going to be able to withstand Oregon for a whole game, and it was clearly evident they couldn't. Morton, again, had a terrible game offensively for Texas Tech. They just couldn't get anything going in this football game. And Oregon's defense just played lights out. They wanted to prove that second half against JMU was just, a bunch of kids playing that hadn't seen the field, and that's why they gave up those points in the second half against JMU. Well, they weren't falling for that here against Texas Tech, and Oregon really just dominates this game from the beginning to the end. And I'm not saying that Texas Tech didn't belong in this game, but like I told you in my prediction show on this, I just didn't feel that Texas Tech had the players across the board to beat an Oregon team, and it just proved to be true on that situation there. Was one of the only games I picked correctly. Oregon to win this game was literally the only game I had selected right in this playoff. In the second round, the quarterfinal round here, because I had Ohio State beating Miami, and obviously I had Oregon beating Texas Tech, and we'll get to the other two games here in a minute. So, well, there we go. Oregon, wins pretty comfortably here over Texas Tech. 23 well, let's nothing. Move over to the Rose Bowl, and this was a matchup of Alabama versus Indiana. And remember, going into the game, folks, I had a lot of questions about Indiana. How are they going to handle the hangover of beating Ohio State in the Big Ten? How are they going to handle the loss of Stephen Daly? Was the winning of the Heisman Trophy going to hamper Fernando Mendoza's practice and his focus on this football game? And I just thought the pageantry and the scenery and the everything that comes along with the Rose Bowl itself might have just been a little too much for Indiana in this football game. And boy, was I absolutely wrong in this area. We had Indiana come out and really just dominate this game. They end up winning 38-3 here. The biggest beatdown anybody's put on Alabama in a bowl game, I think, in the history of the program. So that was real amazing to see. I really think this game came down to about 12 minutes and 45 seconds to go in the second quarter. Alabama had a fourth down and two on their own 35-yard line, and Kalen DeBoer decided to go for it. It was kind of like a chess match here. Alabama was going to go for it. Then Indiana called a timeout, and then Alabama came back out and was going to go for it. Then they called a timeout. Ultimately, it ended up getting the great face of Cignetti on the sidelines. The world famous Cignetti face that's been all over social media after that, where he's just like, you guys are really thinking you're going to get this fourth down on your own 35-yard line. Well, it ended up not happening. Alabama couldn't get that first down, and it just took a couple plays after that for Indiana to score off of that. Again, they were starting at Alabama's 35-ish yard line. They scored quick, boom, make this game 10-0, and then the route was on from there, folks. Ty Simpson really couldn't get anything going in this game. Ultimately, he ended up getting injured and taken out of this game, forcing Austin Mack to come in. I really think Austin Mack played pretty decently, considering he probably didn't practice too much for Indiana heading into the bowl game. And I think one thing it might show Alabama going into 2026 is that Austin Mack might be their guy moving forward. Big kid, 6'6", 235 pounds or something like that. So, big solid kid. Looked pretty decently considering what he was up against there. But ultimately, Indiana here in this game, they just, honestly, I don't even know if they made a mistake anywhere in the football game, whether it was an assignment, a penalty, something. They just didn't make any mistakes that I can remember in this football game. They looked clean all the way around, and I know that's how like Kirk Cinetti likes to go here with his football teams. He might not have five-star talent at every position, but he knows he's going to get these guys to play perfectly, and they did that in this game. Alabama really had no chance. Yes, I selected Alabama to win this game 31-28, and I ended up having, definitely not winning in this game here. So Indiana absolutely routs Alabama 38-3. We'll see how Indiana goes into the Peach Bowl. Is this excitement of this program going to be too much as they move into the Peach Bowl? We'll get into that here in a day or two with the predictor show on those two games. But anyways, bottom line here, Indiana looks absolutely fantastic, and Alabama looked absolutely dreadful here in the Rose Bowl. Let's move down to the Sugar Bowl on New Year's Day night. And what did we see there? Well, I told you going into this game in my predictor show that I felt like in order for Ole Miss to win this game, Trinidad Chambliss was going to have the absolute game of his life. And let me tell you something, folks. He did that. Absolutely amazing performance here. So Ole Miss ends up beating Georgia 39-34 in an absolute classic, to say the least. In the first half of this game, Ole Miss jumped out, took the lead in this game. Looked like, wow, this is going to be quite the game. Georgia then kind of came back in this game, took it up, takes the lead at 21-12, going late into the second quarter. Ole Miss ends up moving the ball. They end up having a terrible, a terrible time at the end of the quarter, or the end of the half, I guess, in the second quarter. They just looked out of sorts. They could have got a score here on the last drive, but they ended up not getting the score. We come out into the second half here, and Georgia ends up punting on their first series. This is an area where they could have really extended the score from 21-12 out. Ole Miss ends up going for it on fourth down in their drive on the 49-yard line, right around there. I think it was the 49. It might have been the 50-yard line. They end up not getting that gain, turning the ball over to Georgia, and this is where you thought, oh boy, like this is just where Georgia's going to extend it. They end up taking that ball only 12 yards here on 6 plays, so not very good production. They end up missing a field goal here. Ole Miss then comes back on the next series, and boom, 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 7 plays, 63 yards. They scored a touchdown there. Cut it to 21-19. Georgia then comes back on the next series, kicks the field goal to extend the lead at 24-19. Then we get into the fourth quarter here, and Ole Miss has a great drive, 8 plays, 75 yards here from the third into the fourth quarter. They take the lead at 27-24, so they get the touchdown and the 2-point conversion here. The next play, Georgia ends up fumbling the ball. Next series, Georgia ends up fumbling the ball. Ole Miss gets a touchdown to take it to 34-24, and now you really got something brewing here. 10-point lead into the fourth quarter there for Ole Miss, but we've all seen this play out before for Georgia. Georgia comes down right after that, 6 plays real quick, under 2 minutes, 75 yards. They get a score, cutting this down to 34-31. Then we had Ole Miss punt. We had Georgia get the ball back and kick a field goal. And it really looked like Georgia was going to score a touchdown here on this drive, but they ended up missing a play in the back of the end zone to score a touchdown. They ended up taking the field goal to tie this game up at 34 apiece. But the problem is they left just a little bit too much time on the clock there. We had Ole Miss come down and It was 3rd and 5, and Trinidad Chambliss just hits an absolute beautiful pass to get them down into plus territory into Georgia's side of the field. So Ole Miss hits that field goal to make it 37-34. There's like 6 seconds left on the clock. Ole Miss has to kick off. They kick off to Georgia. Georgia ends up trying to do a throwback pass, I guess, in a way. They ended up getting a safety on that. The ball ended up hitting the pylon and going out of bounds, putting this game at 39-34. The last 2 minutes of this game took 30 minutes of real time because they had they brought the stage out on the field to celebrate. Then there was a second left after the ball hit the pylon. And then we had it felt like a 2.5 minute toss the ball around for Georgia, trying to get some kind of semblance of the Cal Stanford game back in the day where, they can run this ball all the way back somehow. Ended up not happening. So Ole Miss ends up winning this game. Absolutely tremendous victory there for Ole Miss. Obviously, with Lane Kiffin not being there's been a lot of questions. Could this team win? And they absolutely can. Trinidad Chambliss was absolutely amazing. Keywan Lacey had 98 yards rushing. I said he'd have to have 100 yards rushing to win this game, and he came up just short at 98, and they still ended up winning the game. So probably the best game of the playoffs so far. Ole Miss defeating Georgia. And we'll see. We've got some real interesting matchups here as we move into the semifinal round. We have Ole Miss playing Miami just coming up on Thursday night, and we got Indiana playing Oregon on Friday night. So this should be some incredibly good football, and we'll see who can get into the national championship game of these 4 teams. Well, there is the recap show for the college football playoff quarterfinal games. We'll be bringing you the prediction show probably tomorrow. That'll be Sunday. What we're going to see between these other semifinal games. And we'll get to that. And hopefully everyone had a great and happy and prosperous New Year's. And a fantastic 2026 is heading your way, I'm sure. So there it is, folks. Remember, gather round in ALTT. We'll see you soon.